Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, November 30th, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Tessier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I am Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com, the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we're going to start with the Flyers briefly, and then we're going to move on for sure for all you non-Flyers fans. But the news that just broke in a little bit of last, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, that the Flyers have asked permission from the Columbus Blue Jackets to talk to associate GM Bill Zito. And that's something that I didn't realize actually until this tweet, that Bill Zito is not an assistant GM. He's actually the only associate GM in the NHL.
Really?
For what it's worth. Yeah, he is. And I was doing some research about this in the last few minutes, and basically what came down to was when Jarmo, took over from Finland, he wanted somebody who had a lot more understanding of things to have a bigger role, and gave Zito the associate GM position as opposed to the assistant GM position. So for what that's worth, I mean, I don't think it's worth much, but I think it's just a title, but he is actually technically an associate GM. And we've had that before, but I think we had associate GMs with like Mark Hunter, right? Like he was.
Yes.
No, he was not. He was an assistant. He was an assistant GM.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is actually an associate GM. So,
but he was also player personnel, right, Mike? So it's close.
Right. And if anything, the assistant GM was basically a title. I mean, he was the director of all scouting and player personnel, which was a big responsibility.
Yes.
So a little bit on Zito for Flyers fans out there, and the exciting thing to me about this is,
well, can I just ask this question because yesterday they interviewed Chuck Fletcher.
Right.
And I'm sure the organization is just doing their due diligence.
Yeah.
But if they were sold on Fletcher, would they be asking for permission to talk to somebody else? To me, this sounds like Fletcher might not be the front runner, that he's one of many candidates, and that it's still an open thing to go for.
I think it is more open than people are assuming. I think I don't, and that also, I think how open it is might also be changing. I do think that Dave Scott and Paul Holmgren are not necessarily in lockstep with everything here. So, maybe Homer wants one GM more, maybe Scott wants one GM more. There's different things that, come into this, right? And
well, let's be real about one thing, and that is there is no cognitive plan here. And that's it's obvious to the fans, it's obvious to us. They are doing this on the fly. So there's no way of knowing, Mike. Honestly, there's really, because they don't know.
No, and I think the initial feeling was that that Homer would go with somebody pretty safe. Okay, so Fletcher has been a GM before, obviously in Minnesota. Dave Nonis, who they're talking to as well. I don't know if that's out there or not, but they're definitely going to talk to Dave Nonis.
That's out there. LeBrun had that out.
Trust me, that got out there.
So yeah, I was talking to you guys
and
about
I love the reaction on that. There were some people I know who are Flyers fans who,
Well, the interesting thing about these two guys is I think that they are safe. Homer is a bit of an old school guy now, in the NHL, and he would go to Berkey, who's his friend, and Burke would say, you should talk to Nonis, and because they're obviously tight. But I think that the other. The things I heard from him was, he wants more analytics and stuff like that, which was weird coming out of Homer's mouth after the word analytics didn't really fit with that. But go ahead, Russ, and then I'll get into some of Bill Zito's qualifications.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say, so as far as Fletcher, right? The thought is if Fletcher calls up his buddy Quenneville wants to come, they're just doing due diligence because nobody could touch being able to bring in Joel Quenneville, right? So I don't know who Bill Zito can bring in. That's the thing where he is going to be if you want that bright new guy that Dave Scott said, then that's the guy you're going to bring in. I mean, he's good at pronunciations. He made me, repronounce Petteri Nokalainen. I've never mispronounced it since. So that's good. But no,
he knows it's finished. That's for sure.
Yes. But the thing is, so we really don't know which way they're going. I will tell you this. The hardcore Flyer fan will just live through this, but they're not happy. The casual Flyers fans, based on what happens here, they either lose them for a significant period of time or they're on board. So this is an important decision because right now there's nobody in town and there's no way you can paint a good picture about what's going on with this team.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that game the other night was horrendous. And the game the other night was just absolutely, I mean, the mood around that game the other night, I was talking to Captain EO, and about that. And you were there, Russ, and you brought up just Eric was saying, basically, this is a game that just never should have existed. Like he said, there was nothing. Right. That's how he described it because, you have a lame duck coach in a weird situation trying to get this team. It was just, they should have just called it off. He said it was just kind of a ridiculous game to play.
And based on what Kevin said yesterday on the Buzzcast, my idea that I said a couple days ago that the worst thing for the Flyers is the fact that they're only 5 points or 6 points out of a playoff spot. That this is an opportunity for them with bad goaltending, with a situation where they need to give Carter Hart more time. I think they could be in the Jack Hughes sweepstakes, but the ownership group and Holmgren are on a posture where they're wanting to, make sort of now moves to improve them, and they're close enough to the playoffs that they could get right back into it.
They're such a strange team, and to talk about it, they shouldn't be in the Jack Hughes sweepstakes with their talent level, right? So the bottom line is,
they shouldn't be, but you know what? There's years where we said, hey, how did the Kings end up drafting so high? And now we see why.
Well, there's a lot of parity, and there's not a lot of terrible.
How did Columbus end up drafting so high? Some years you just bottom out.
Yeah, there's a pot at the end of the rainbow, and his name is Hughes. And honestly, if you're almost halfway through the season and you're near the bottom of the league,
but you know what? Hold on. I'm going to tell you guys something. This seems like the easiest decision for you guys to say. They are not thinking that way. They are not.
No, and I don't really think teams honestly think that way until.
I think one did team. The Leafs thought that way, but beyond that,
and Buffalo.
But then what they did, Russ, was they went and they strategically went all in to go that way later on in the season, right? Like it was a slow decline. It wasn't like right off the top.
Right.
Like they had a plan to get there. And remember, they didn't have the best shot at getting them. They could have not gotten them because it was the year after McDavid that the rules changed and everything got a little bit better. It doesn't switch out much, but there's a lot more risk than the McDavid year.
Well, let me get into some, and then we'll move on. But let me get into some of Bill Zito's stuff because I've done research on him before for Buffalo and Minnesota, and I've been impressed, to date. And the Quenneville question is a really interesting one, and I brought that up to a friend of mine who, who's connected to the whole thing and knows Zito pretty well. Yeah. And so Zito's background was he was a player agent, obviously, very successful player agent, successful in an interesting way in that he was probably the biggest small agent that you had. Like, there's the big agencies that are very up at the top, and they control
reports, CAA,
right. They control everything. Zito was an individual guy who couldn't get those guys because those players would go to the big agencies right away. So he had to go out and find star players, which he did in players like Kimmo Timonen, Tuukka Rask, Brian Rafalski, Tim Thomas, Antti Niemi, and Terry Panarin, which I thought was really interesting. And there's others. So, and that's an interesting thing. Think about that for a second. So, but then the other thing is,
I don't think there's anything there. You're connecting the wrong dots. He wants to be in a coastal place. He doesn't want to be in Philadelphia. Trust me.
Well, I know. I'm just throwing it out there. I do agree with what you're saying. Zito's agency was located, and Zito was the first. So Zito, another thing he just did recently was he was the general manager of the team that went into the USA team that went to the World Championships last year. That did pretty well. They got a bronze medal, but they were much better than people thought they would. That's the team that beat Canada in the first game, and they really were surprising people. And one of the things they had on that team that no one has ever been able to do before in the World Championships was Patrick Kane. Right. And again, a Chicago connection. Again, Bill Zito, and it does take some pride in this. I was told is the first guy to get Patrick Kane to play in the World Championships. Right. Okay. That's a big deal. And when I talked to my buddy about Quenneville, Zito and Quenneville have an incredible relationship. So that is to think about this. It's not impossible that Fletcher's the only person that brings Quenneville. We don't even know if the Flyers want to go that route, but if they do want to go the route of Quenneville.
I'm going to plead ignorance on the connection between Fletcher and Quenneville, because
there's definitely a connection between Fletcher and Quenneville.
No, there's a bigger connection there, Mike. But
okay,
here's the thing, Eck. And that's fine with Quenneville. I can't imagine there's a scenario that you could build up that the team wouldn't want him, and that would scare me if there was.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. They've just been very, I do agree with you. Like, I can't imagine there's a scenario. I think this has something to do with Quenneville. I think this whole Hextall firing has something to do with Quenneville.
Yeah, I see. I may be wrong here, but again, Quenneville has never coached in the East. He's always been not a West Coast, but a guy, always a Central Division coach. I don't know whether, it's logical he wants to coach in Philadelphia.
Babcock, come on, it's the same exact thing,
What, Detroit to Toronto was some sort of continental shift?
Central Division, that was a Central Division team as well.
He was on the West Coast with Anaheim. He was in Detroit. He was in Toronto. He'll go where the money is. That maybe the Quenneville will too. I'm just saying Quenneville has been.
It matters to these guys. Actually, if anything, the East is when a guy gets older, they want to be in the East.
Yeah, I don't think it matters to Quenneville that
much. It's like the Eastern. I mean, Philadelphia's a really great place to live and play and coach because it's so close to so many other cities.
Here's the bigger problem. The bigger problem is if Quenneville comes. He wants say over the roster. Is Paul Holmgren and Dave Scott, are they going to allow him to have say over the roster? Yes. Or clearly if someone like Zito comes in, he'll work out a deal with Quenneville because Quenneville's, been in the league longer, and I think Zito is an open guy, and he would work that out. And Fletcher's a buddy, so he would too.
Yeah.
You bring another GM, another hardened GM. Let's say you even bring in Tom Fitzgerald. He may say, hell no, I'm not letting him do the roster, and then Quenneville wouldn't want to come. Still, landing Quenneville is only about a 30% chance. There's nowhere near.
Did Quenneville have a say in Chicago, though?
No, but he wants a say now. That's the problem.
Is that's the word that's out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Based on what happened in Chicago, the word that's out is he wants a say on the roster, which I get it.
He wants the Babcock deal.
But any coach of his level would get that, and he'll get that, now and then.
I mean, if you're going to be an effective organization, you're going to listen to your coach about the roster. If it's a closed door, you work with what I give you. Then it doesn't matter what coach you bring in. You could bring in Jesus, and he's not going to turn anything around.
Things are changing. You know that.
No, I'm agreeing with you, Russ. Like the GM needs to hear. So if you're going to bring in a closed-ear GM who's not going to work collaboratively with the coach and understand things, I mean, that relationship is so complex. And I think this would be a really cool thing to get if we could find an ex-coach or someone to come on and talk about the nuances of how you call players up, who wants to, all those different things that work in tandem. It'd be an amazing thing to hear because it's not as just cut and dry as a GM figuring out, do this, do that. Like a new world, as you said, Russ.
If Jesus was the GM, Peter, there wouldn't be a shortage of water or wine at that particular team.
Yeah.
Let me finish out Zito's credentials, then we can move on to discussing other things real quick because some people I'm getting a lot of tweets about this. What is he about? Because a lot of people don't know what he's about. So, like I said, he was a very successful agent. He walked away from basically like a 7-figure a year job as a successful agent to step into
management,
a low six figure job as an associate general manager. So he did that because he had done everything he could as an agent and wants to and has a passion to win a Stanley Cup. That kind of thing should resonate with people. Like that's something I think is impressive, and we don't see it all the time. We've seen it done before. But it's rare that you see an agent that's this successful. We've seen agents that are lesser successful. Like, Fletcher's a good example. He was an agent. So Zito, that's he has he's a Yale graduate. He's he's a Yale guy. He's really sharp. I've talked to him before. A very sharp guy, and that also plays into well because he's a guy who can negotiate contracts. He's not going to get taken by another agent, obviously, in a contract negotiation because he knows all the tricks. And I think that appeals well to the Flyers because the Flyers have a couple big contracts coming up that are issues. And Provorov especially, and the word is out there, that Provorov and Gandler, I think he represents him. That was a tough, that looked like it was going to be a war no matter what. It will be a war no matter what. So you want to have a person in there that's going to be able to handle that. I think that Flyers fans can be excited about this because I don't think it's as why go to somebody, in my opinion, who was recently, fired for doing his job, when you can if
it's Ron Francis, is because you have an owner who's deranged. That's
everybody has situations like that too. And I'm not saying that
they do. The Flyers fans that I've spoken to would rather have somebody with a clean slate as the GM. Now, as the coach, it's a different story.
Totally different story as the coach, and I do agree with you on that one.
But the problem is the linkage, and you may get a different GM because of the inroads with a coach. That's the only way that Zito loses this deal, is if there's some other coach that's got inroads with a different GM, because you could see a package deal happening in this.
Oh yeah, there's no question. And I think if Fletcher gets this job, it'll be probably because of the linkage to Quenneville.
Right.
That now. Like I said, all I know is that I've been told through players in Chicago and different people that I know that Zito has a good relationship with Quenneville, and that the belief is that Quenneville would definitely play for him. So whether or not Zito can convince the Flyers of that's another story. So that's how this is going to play out. They're going to talk, and I think what's exciting to me as a Flyers fan is they're not just looking at retreaded GMs, that not just Zito but other GMs that could come in. Like the assistant up in Buffalo. Who's
Greeley.
Steve
Greeley, right? And the guy out in LA that we've been talking about. Sorry, my names are
Michael
losing.
Fuda.
Right, Michael Fuda.
Michael Fuda is overseas currently, so I don't think he's in the mix. I don't.
Well, it's surprising. More of these GM interviews happen via Skype than you would think. It's pretty interesting. So anyway, we'll just we'll move on from there. But I think that it is an interesting thing, and especially like you said, Mike, given that it really was trending towards Fletcher's just the guy, he's going to get it. And now this news comes out today, so we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
We'll be brief on the other touchstone that we've talked about all week, because it's now almost 48 hours or 24 hours to go. The only thing I would say is, and
tomorrow at 5 o'clock, right? Tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. Correct.
We should go on the air tomorrow at 4.
Oh God.
No,
I think it's going to be resolved by then. I think I
refuse to give it the airtime at this point. No.
He's either going to be traded, or he's going to sign, or he's going, or there'll be a message from his agent saying he's not going to sign, but way before 5 o'clock tomorrow. I think it'll be.
So
if it's gone to this point, do you think it goes down to the end?
Well, yesterday, Mackenzie said on air.
Yes.
That trade partners are drying up. That was the headline underneath Mackenzie.
Well, this is let me explain why, Peter, and then you can continue. On that long-term deal, if he signs a deal a little under 7, the cap adjustment on the first year would be over $9 million, and that's why. And teams right now can't fit the $9 million. That could be remedied by the Leafs taking a player back in the deal that balances out the salary. But that's the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's easily rectified. I think that's possible. I think that's telling you the honest truth. I think that's a little bit of disinformation going out there to put pressure on things. Right. And while I have look, he's the Bob father for a reason.
Yes.
I think when it comes to more accurate stuff, I think I'm tending to trust a little more of the Friedman side of things on things like that. I think there's a little bit more, a little closer ear to the ground there than where Bob's getting his stuff on that.
Yeah.
And that's just me, flame away audience, because I know, speaking ill of Bob McKenzie is and
we're not speaking ill of him. And
I'm just telling you what I think. I think that's a rectified thing. I think if a team came in with a legit offer for Dubas and they had the ability to take him on, this whole idea of prorated stuff, Nylander's going to jump to say, well, I could lose $7 million total, or I could be paid $5 and then I'm on to the next year. He's going to take it.
And that's why I believe, and maybe I'm proven wrong, but I believe if he signs a contract, it's going to be the 2 to 3 year bridge, because he does not want to sign a long-term extension that has no trade protection, especially and that's what apparently, that's what everybody thinks now is this charm campaign that's going on, where Babcock is saying, oh, I love Willie. Willie's the greatest, he's the best thing since sliced bread, because he's trying to basically, it's a charm campaign to woo him to sign the contract. Now, to me, that tells me it's not for certain. I believe the percentage of him not signing is going up. And if that's the nuclear option, that's the mutually assured destruction, because I think that hurts Nylander. I think it hurts the Leafs. And, I don't think it's a good scenario. But the thing is the two sides have been so intransigent over the last week that I don't know whether they will finally agree, or this is just a bunch of posturing that they'll sign a contract at the 11th hour. If it's a contract, it's going to be a bridge deal.
Well, I mean, I can't say that, because if
that's my prediction.
Because if a team's willing to pay him top dollar, the Leafs are going to sign Nylander to whatever contract that team wants, because then they're going to ship him out, right? So, I can't say it's just going to be a bridge deal just because of that. If it's with the Leafs, it's a bridge deal. I agree with that.
Well, Russ, I am sort of in lockstep with what Elliot Friedman said. I don't think it's going to matter to the Leafs. He's getting traded. He's getting traded.
I agree.
But it might not be this year, because if they sign the long-term deal, the Leafs have $12 million in cap space and they can accommodate that. Whereas he becomes a lot more valuable next year for years 2 through 6 of a 6-year deal if his cap hit is 6.2 or 6.3.
Right, but what if a team like the Flyers wants him for 8 years? They're going to ask the Leafs to sign him to the 8-year deal.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a remote possibility. I think the Leafs would do that if the deal was guaranteed. I don't know. I mean, but let's just say I think part of this situation is going to be finalized. I mean, this is not going out on a limb because there is the deadline. It's going to be finalized in the next 24 hours. We're going to know what's going on.
I think we're going to get an email or a notice that he's been signed, and then we're going to get an email and a notice that he's been traded. I don't think he's going to hit the Leafs roster at all this year.
That would be a slightly surprising. But
that's just my gut feeling. I have no.
Yeah.
But it's the same way I feel about climate change. It's a gut feeling.
If they get the top 4 defensemen that they desperately need, then I think that's a beneficial deal for them, and I think Dubas would deal it. But the only thing I say as a caveat is if he does not like the offers he's getting, then they're going to sign him, use him as basically as an own rental for a year, make a run, and then in the summer, trade him at the draft. Yeah. So we'll see.
Sorry, getting a lot of texts about different things as this happens. I apologize.
Well, that's fine. If you need to do that, we can go to the next
contract. You guys move on, okay? So I appreciate it. I don't have anything new on Nylander at all yet, but I'm texting around. I just put another text out to somebody right now. So I'm going to be posting a blog up in probably about an hour and a half. So hopefully I'll have something by that point about this. So yeah, good luck.
I'm going to look and see what Hockey Insider says. That's what I'm going to do.
See you later.
Okay. Yes, Alexander Daig has his finger on the pulse of the NHL.
I don't know. Hockey Insider hasn't posted since 2017. What's up, bro?
Did he go over to Russia? Is that where Daig is?
There's another guy out there. I can't remember who it is.
Oh, Rumor Break.
Yeah,
Rumor Break. He's classic. I love him. Him and incarcerated Bob should be sent on a missile to the moon. Okay, just one thing before we start our list, and if people want to throw in their candidates in the chat, please do, and Russ will monitor it for good suggestions. The Buffalo Sabres 10-game winning streak ended yesterday, losing 5. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just acknowledging the fact that this is a team that nobody expected this out of, and
but nobody expected them to keep it up either. Sure.
No, I mean, when you're facing Tampa Bay and Nashville on a 3-game road trip, I assumed that that the streak was gonna end, but it was a close game, and the thing I garnered from this game is not on the Buffalo side, but it was on the Tampa side. Tampa's continuing to win with Louis Domingue. I mean, they're giving up more goals, but they're continuing to win with Louis Domingue.
They're an elite team. I mean, it almost doesn't matter with them. That's why, here's the thing, okay? In this NHL right now, we've got 4 or 5 elite teams. There's a bucket full that have a chance, and then there's teams like the Sabres and the Rangers that go on early season runs, and then when things settle in, they settle in. And the Sabres have a better chance at a playoff spot this year than they've had in previous years, but things are going to settle in for them. Goaltending is going to fall off a little bit. Scoring's going to fall off a little bit. Jeff Skinner is not going to score at this rate.
Right.
So like that's the whole thing. So you look at it and you say, all right, I get it. I didn't want to get overly dramatic about their win streak, and I'm not going to get overly dramatic on the next losing streak they have either. But I think there's 2 or 3 great teams in the East and 2 or 3 great teams in the West. After that, I think it's luck and injury and other things like that.
After that, it's a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start. And what we're doing here is we're looking at, and this is the way I approached it. The other Peter and Russ may have approached it differently, but that's why this is, I think, an interesting exercise. I'm not looking at the quality of the player, best bang for the buck solely in terms of the worst contracts. I'm also looking at the age of the player and how much they're being paid and how long the deal is. And even if the player is an elite player, I think that, that deal is a bad deal. So, so we're taking 5 players who we think are the worst contracts in the NHL. Peter, you go first. Give us your first one and just give it.
I don't
First
have
one
them
is
ranked
worst
in
one or just
No, we're not doing it in any order. Just say 5.
A couple of mine are shocker, are probably odd, and one I'm going to say my controversial one right off the top. I'm going to tell you how I went with it. So It's a brand new contract signed this past summer.
Okay.
And I looked at a couple things before I say it. I looked at a couple things when I did this. I recognize things are a moving target with this, but I took a look at some established ones. I took a look at some new ones. I took a look at value, but I also looked at cost per point on some of the players. So some obviously are players you're not, like some defensemen who are maybe overpaid, and they're not point generators. But this one is supposed to be a point generator. And right now,
how many points did you give for intangibles, Peter?
I didn't give anything for intangibles.
All right, but I'm saying,
just saying,
go in there, the magic word of intangibles comes into play.
Look, if you want to have cost per Corsi or whatever, we can do that too. That's another discussion.
Okay.
So this one is a new one, very close to home given our recent conversations. His current cost per point is $1.75 million.
Okay.
Mr. James Van Riemsdyk at $7 million a year.
Yeah, there's an injury there, so you have to mitigate.
Okay, there's an injury. Okay, actually, you know what? I looked up and I didn't even realize he was injured. So
he's out for 5. He was out for 5.
Then take that out. So it didn't have a mark by him that said he was injured. So that was my
But you know what? I mean, he comes off a 36 goal year. He gets the biggest payday of any winger in free agency. He's 29 years old. I mean, this is the reason why the Leafs couldn't afford him. They would have wanted him back if the demand was more reasonable. But the thing is that he's being utilized by Hackstall, as Russ has said, the same way he was being utilized in Toronto as a third line guy. But the third line in Toronto had Bozak and Mitch Marner on it. And the third, who was he playing with?
Well, he does play with Simmons, but lately it's been Lindblom, but it was Dale Weiss. Like it's like it's been switching around.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Russ, you give us your first.
Okay. So my first is Henrik Lundqvist. And like, again, it has nothing to do with the player and the player's ability. It's just looking at the financials. So when you look at the financials for Henrik Lundqvist, and again, Glenn Sader is still there, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. You may have hired a new GM. You may have asked him to rebuild, but this is like rebuilding Trump Plaza around that lady who won the lawsuit and kept the house there and Trump couldn't get a garage out of it. That's exactly what's happening here because Henrik Lundqvist is 36. His deal is through 2021 at $8.5 million a year, no move clause. Now, like I said yesterday, the best thing for a Ranger rebuild obviously would be to move Lundqvist. And if you could have moved him in some sort of Nylander deal, that's an ideal situation for the Rangers. They can't do that because Henrik Lundqvist doesn't want to do it. So the club has to act like they don't even want to think about it because it doesn't matter. It's a moot point. He holds the hammer. That's why he's the king.
Okay. My first one is the definition of low-hanging fruit. And when you're looking for bad trades or bad signings, the first stop is always the Edmonton Oilers. And Milan Lucic.
Yeah. He's on my list too.
Yeah, I mean, and you can scratch that one off because or you can just kick it. Milan Lucic with 4 more years left at $6 million, and this year has in 25 games a goal and 4 assists. It was a brutal decision by Peter Chiarelli. It's gotten from bad to worse.
$1.2 million a point.
Yeah, well, there you go. And I mean, honestly, I thought it was bad from the very beginning, but I never thought it would be this bad. I thought he'd be a 15 to 20 goal scorer, but his speed has dropped, and now they can't. I don't even know if they're playing him on some sort of energy line with Kyle Brodziak and Zach Kassian. So he's never going to get points. This is an albatross around their neck, and they're not going to be able to get rid of it. So that, to me, that's one of the worst contracts in the league. All right, go ahead, Peter. Give us your second.
Okay, another one. I've never liked this deal from the start, and I think it was I think it's probably there's and now this is more of a personal bias, and there's probably another contract on this team that others would go after first, but I do not like Ryan Johansson at $8 million per and $380,000 a point. I think it's too much. I think they overpaid right from the start. I don't think, if you look at all the number one centers in the league, Ryan Johansson is not an $8 million caliber number one center. I just don't see it. I think and again, there's a lot of low hanging fruit in this list, and I was trying to look for things that are different. And I think he's probably at about 1.5 million too much.
Yeah, I mean, he had 61 points his first full year in Nashville, 54, and he's basically on pace for around 60 right now, only 4 goals. He's only 26 years old. So
he's got age on his side still. That's the one.
Yeah.
He's got age on his side, but it's
it's not a great contract, but it's not a terrible.
Well, here's the other thing. He was more than a point a game in the playoffs. He was 14 points in 13 playoff games.
That's true. That's a fair point.
But still, is he overpaid? Yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Russ, go ahead. Second one.
All right. My second one is Jake Voracek. This one's a doozy. So now, again, Jake Voracek gets points. It's not like he's not a point producer, but the deal is just unbelievable. And again, the GM for that deal is still there. He basically has $8.2 million coming to him through 2023-24. So for people to say, well, maybe you should trade Jake Voracek, you can't. It's literally an untradeable contract. Plus, in 2021, he has a $4 million bonus, and in 2022-23, he has a $5 million bonus. So even if you want to trade him in one of those years, the team is going to wait until after the Flyers pay the bonus. And the agents know this. So basically, when Jake Voracek got this contract, he knew he could get a house with a 20-year mortgage because he was safe.
Jeez. Yeah. No. Okay.
Good work agent, though. I give his agent full marks.
Oh, sure. My number 2 will be a bit controversial because he's considered still one of the best at his position, but I think the Carey Price contract is insane. And it's funny that Carey Price, if you look at his statistics, and we know injuries have piled up, and we know he's but as soon as he signed that deal, he signed the deal in July of 2017 to make $10.5 million, the equal of Taves and Kane. His highest goals against in Montreal was 2.59. The last 2 years, right now, he's had identical 3.11 goals against last year and so far this year. It's not the quality of the player. It's the term and the amount of the contract and the age of the player. He's 31. I know goaltenders age better than other players, but this contract is abysmal. And it could be an albatross if injuries keep piling up, or if he is just a middle of the road goaltender, which I don't think he will be, but I don't think he's going to be top echelon like he was previously before this new contract. Peter, go ahead.
This is now I'm getting into low hanging fruit, and
that's what they're there for.
This one is another classic defense that is signed old and signed for long, and that's Brent Seabrook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on my list. He was on my list. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, this is one of the nooses around Stan Bowman's neck that he signed all by himself, and it might be one of the reasons why Joel Quenneville wants authority and contracts for player personnel on his next deal. So he's not the guy who has he's not the hangman holding it, trying to keep the guy from the gallows pole, right? Like it's bad, and it's one of those deals that's going to cripple basically cripple Stan Bowman in the Blackhawks for some time until they can find a way out of it. 6.87 million. It's ugly.
6.875 million for 5. And the thing is, the 5 more years is what's the killer, because maybe Bowman could retain salary and move him out, but not at 5 years. I don't know if I think he's 33.
Ugly.
He's 33. He's older than the coach.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know whether anybody is going to be willing to take on him even at a $5 million hit, let alone 6.875. Yeah. Ross, go ahead. Give your number 3.
So mine will also cover what's being talked about in the chat room. Like Ryan Kessler is being talked about in the chat room. You knew somebody from the Ducks that we brought up. Mine is Corey Perry, because he's been diminishing returns for quite a few years now, going from 50 goals to 37. Then he got back to 43, then 33, 34, 19, 17. He hasn't gotten over 60 points since 15, 16. He's currently injured now. He has 8.6 coming to him until 2020, 21.
Yeah, the only thing they might luck out here with, and I'm sure Anaheim ownership is not going to consider themselves lucky, but that they can put that on LTIR if this latest injury is career ending.
Yeah, I don't think it's not though. It's only 4 to 6 weeks. It's not.
No. They say he's going to be out for the season. I thought.
Is he the season?
I think he was a shorter term. I'm pretty sure it's the season.
All right. Well, that's the case. I mean, he didn't have a point in the play.
But it's still it was still a bad contract from the point that they signed it, because he was declining. He really was. I had Kessler as one of my extra choices, but I'll go a different direction. Again, low hanging fruit here. Andrew Ladd and the New York Islanders. Yeah, that deal.
Mike, you're right. It's 5 months for Perry. I missed that.
Yeah. Andrew Ladd has 4 more years at $5.5 million. And he had a slow start with the Islanders, and then the first year, and then played well, I think, in the second half. But he's just not. I mean, I'm looking up his stats right now. With the Islanders this year in 14 games, he's got 7 points. This is 4 more years, and he's 32 years old. So you're talking about till age 36. I think they brought him in to be sort of like the character guy to sort of supplement John Tavares. And now that Tavares is gone, I don't think he's quick enough, and I don't think he's going to score enough to make that contract worthwhile.
No. Okay. Everyone in Winnipeg is really glad that he turned down 6x6 from Chevy that summer. So yeah.
I think the other, and for those who are talking about Dave Nonis in Philadelphia, here's a note. The Leafs lucked out that Dave Bolland did not take, when Dave Bolland got hurt and when he was a free agent, the Leafs offered him 6 years at $5 million, and he took 6 years, $5.5 million from Florida because of the no tax situation. Imagine if Nonis had signed that on top of the Clarkson deal. And
I was just going to say, I mean, the Clarkson deal is his lasting legacy, right? Like,
yes, it is. Okay, give us your number 4, Peter.
I have it's a tie, really. It is, again. I didn't rank them. I sort of put them down. I have Bobby Ryan.
Yeah,
Bobby Ryan. I mean, when the whole Karlsson drama started up last year, and word leaked out that to get Karlsson you had to take Ryan.
Yeah.
That was the final nail in the coffin of the Bobby Ryan contract.
Right.
And that, first of all, that there was belief that they could find enough value in Karlsson that you had to take on $7.25 million to get him with it. And that the fact that, Ryan right now, $453,000 a point. Bobby Ryan was the number 2 pick after Sidney Crosby. Let's not forget that. He was actually a very talented player.
Oh, no, he was. I covered him for the World Junior team. He was a great player.
And I can remember, because that's when Brian Burke was the GM of the Ducks.
Yeah.
And he said, one of the things he said about Bobby Ryan was this young man was extraordinary in his interviews. And they were patient with him. They didn't bring him up. And Bobby Ryan has some all-world talent, but it's never come together. And he got a massive deal from wrong team.
Yeah.
And it's just been downhill with that. Like he's handcuffed Ottawa forever now.
Yeah, he has. I mean, 7.25 for another 3 years. And that's just and the thing is, I mean, if he could stay in the lineup, I mean, he's had how many broken fingers and hands? It's insane.
And the injuries, right?
Yeah. Russ, number 4.
All right. Well, this is my last one because others have been taken. It's Johnny Boychuk. Now, Johnny Boychuk, this was a cautionary tale from the very beginning. Like, I get that they just Garth Snow wanted to get some defense in there, but Boychuk had already been a big shot blocker and a guy who'd been playing a lot of minutes, like, over 20, 21 minutes a night. He's gone down every year in shot blocking. He's gone down every year in hits. His points are down to the point where he's got 3 points in 24 games.
Yeah.
He's 35 years old. He's got this deal until 2021-22 at $6 million per. That is a killer.
Yeah.
I do have breaking news too.
Go ahead.
Oli Olevi has a knee injury. He's back in Vancouver. He'll know more in 24 to 48 hours. This poor guy, man. This is not getting.
Yeah. I mean,
know what our next topic could be? Top 5 worst draft picks.
Well, he's not there yet, but
I know. I feel bad for Vancouver because this is a talented kid and it is not going well.
We could do that going draft by draft, like going say 2013, 24
missed draft picks.
Yeah.
That'd be a great thing to do in the leading up to the draft, considering we're all going to be there.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'll make up for Russ's because he only had some of the picks were. I'm here. My number 4 will be a little bit controversial because the guy had a 92-point season last year. But again, it's the age and it's the term, and it's Anze Kopitar. Now the previous year he only had 52 points. Last year he had a massive year, 35 goals. 57 assists. This year, 17 points in 24 games. I'm looking at the state of the franchise. I'm looking at his age and the fact that he is not conducive to the speedy game of the league. He's still a good player. He's not a $10 million player, and he's not a $10 million player for another 5 years. So that contract is, I think, a bad one. But I don't know if the Kings really had any option because he was their number 1 center and their key player. But they needed to play a little hardball and pay him a little less, and they didn't. And I think it's going to come back to bite them. Peter, give us your last one, and then we can check on the chat and see if they have any.
They've been mentioning all the same ones. I mean, Blake Wheeler's one that we,
No, come on, he's still producing.
I know
it hasn't even started yet, but interesting when you brought up Corey Perry. When that Blake Wheeler dealer was signed, I started looking. I went and used Perry as an interesting comparable about his up down and the cost and some of the injuries that happen and things like that. And I thought, this is the guy, and Perry's ends 2 years before Wheeler's does. He's got 2 more years after this one.
Right.
And I brought up Perry already.
No, I know. I'm just saying I use Perry as a comparable of how this could work out because yikes. Anyways, so I have 2 left on my list. One is similar to Kopitar, and that's Jonathan Toews.
Okay.
And again, I'm not saying Jonathan Toews doesn't have value, but Jonathan Toews is one of those guys. He and Kane have struck lightning twice with their contracts based on how they came out of their ELCs when the team was really good. And, they basically have these, almost $100 million deals. And they're also the other part of the noose that's around Stan Bowman's neck. Jonathan Toews is still a good player, but his shot rates have dropped. He's cost him basically $500,000 a point so far this season. That's a lot of scratch to be tied up in a guy who you want him on your team, but it's $6 million, not at 10.5.
Yeah. We'll take a couple questions in the chat after I finish up the list here. A couple quick ones because we have to get going.
Go.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Right at the top here, I gotta go.
Okay. All right. Then we'll do questions on Monday then.
Yeah.
The other 2 players on my list, one was a bad signing from the get-go, and that was Louis Eriksson in Vancouver. He's got 3 more years at $6 million. He's got 12 points right now.
And this is an up year for him.
Yeah, right. He had 23 in 50 games the previous year, and he's under contract for, another 3 years at $6 million. So that's a bad one. And another player that was in the news because he got demoted and waived this week was Carl Alzner. Bad fit with an organization. 3 more years at $4.6 million. He's playing for Laval right now. Now, David Pagnotta, the fourth period, reported yesterday that there is some interest from like 3 or 4 teams in Alzner, but it's one of those deals where the team wants to trade a player back to the Canadiens, and they want Montreal to retain. So Montreal's in a bad place here, because if they can't get worth out of him, that's the only option. And I think if he's a $3 million defenseman, I think that he's worthwhile to pick up. If he's at 4.6 for another 3 years, that's tough.
Yeah, I'm going to give honorable mention to Matt. He mentioned Zach Parise at 7 years, 7.5, but like the term is too long because he's playing till he's 41. They didn't expect him to play till he's 41. He's almost a point a game this year, and if his back is cured, he's 34. He's going to have 3, 4, 5 more good years. So I don't think it's as bad as some of these other deals, but it's not a great deal, obviously.
Yeah, and remember with those deals, I mean, I think that's one of the cap recapture deals.
Yeah,
I mean, the way you get out of it is the way that's going on with Corey Perry right now, or with Marian Hossa right now, is that he has an injury that he can't continue his career, and it just goes on LTIR. That's what he's not going to play to 41. He may play to 37, and the last 4 years is just going to be, off the books.
Right.
So, and I think it was front loaded too, so he's not.
It was, and that's why I didn't bring it up.
Yeah, but okay, guys, good show. We will have a resolution to the Nylander saga, hopefully, on Saturday. We will talk about that on Monday. For Eklund, for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.